All right, welcome to the discussions that are shaping the 14th of October 2024. Now, these are poignant conversations because they do affect you and I in one way or another, directly and indirectly. Our first conversation of the day is around employment or unemployment thereof and the untangling of it in Uganda, especially in light of the UBOS results that came out recently, official results that show you now that there's a bit of shift in terms of the population, the demography of that population, and also when it comes to labor and employment, how those statistics then get to influence positively or negatively. I am Priscilla Regina Naloga, a technot focusing on untangling unemployment chain in Uganda. The backbone being that according to the World Bank findings, unemployment rate in Uganda remained unchanged at 2.90%, and this is in 2023, which was the same as of 2022. Also, unemployment rates in Uganda averaged 3.16% from 1991 until 2023, reaching an all-time high of 3.80, and this was in 2020, and a record low of 1.90%, and this was in 2005. Now, when you look at the last 10 years, there has been a rapid growth of the Ugandan labor force, more than 1 million young people entering the job market each year, and this is particularly to Uganda. But this has not been met with a commensurate increase in the number of formal jobs available. You do have situations whereby those that are meant to be retiring are not retiring. Therefore, you cannot have people replacing those that are still in office. Then you also do have the job hiring freeze on government right now, which is also making it difficult for distribution of labor and so many other factors that influence. But my guest is going to be giving us a sneak peek into the factors that are influencing unemployment. Now, although Ugandan youth are commonly regarded as highly entrepreneurial, that is true, that Uganda hosts also the greatest number of young entrepreneurs on the continent. In reality, it's quite different. Most youth-run businesses are small-scale and informal, with little employment generation effects, as well as a high discontinuation rate. They always say that by your next birthday as a business of an entrepreneur young person in Uganda, there's always death. And they're always singing those songs of Amazemiri Mudre as a business. What is leading to that gap? Well, we do have the executive director with UGANET, which is Uganda Network on Law, Ethics and HIV/AIDS, Grace Nayiga, joining us for this discussion to help us understand what the labor market looks like today, 2024, what has led to it looking like this, and what are the challenges that are faced ahead, the discrimination and things like that. Good morning to you, Madam Nayiga.
Good morning, Priscilla. Thank you so much for hosting me this morning. Good morning, our dear viewers.
All right, let's first talk about the statistics. Having stood still at 2.90% for 2 years, and yet before those 2 years, we're looking at a slow progression of employment and the labor market. What forces have actually encouraged this environment?
Thank you so much for your question. So the unemployment levels in the country are really glaring. And there are several factors to that. But one that I could speak to strongly based on our areas of practice as legal aid service providers that focus on legal aid services and advocacy for people living with HIV and women and girls, is that we see a lot of discrimination and stigma for the community of people living with HIV. UBOS has just done its statistics, but we have also a governing body in our area of practice, but also that leads the country in the fight against HIV/AIDS, and that is the Uganda AIDS Commission. In its statistics of 2023, it shows that 1.49 million Ugandans are living with HIV. And of course, you know the statistics, every week 730 people are contracting HIV. But also we know that majority of that population now are young people. And we know that there are very many efforts that have been put in place on ensuring that people living with HIV can live fulfilling lives, they access treatment, and they enjoy human rights like any other individual. Now, when it comes to places of work, is where we have experienced challenges that probably also impact on the statistics that we are seeing. Similar to people living with disabilities, who in many instances you find are trained, fully trained, they have acquired skills, but when it comes to being assimilated into the workplaces, there's usually stigma and discrimination around the employment of these people. The same happens for people living with HIV. We know that in this country there's glaring practices where people are tested before they are actually employed. Some of us even do it in our place, in our homes, that before you're hiring a house manager or maid, as they are commonly known, will want to first test them. Testing is not bad. For us as people that are in the fight to end HIV, we actually encourage testing, but testing must be done properly in adherence to the standard practices, but also in ensuring that human rights are not violated. Consent is a critical aspect, and where it is withdrawn, where it is bad, then it becomes a violation of human rights. The Constitution of the Republic of Uganda is very clear on the right to privacy, but also the freedom and protection from inhuman treatment, torture, and discrimination. And once you treat me in an unfair way, then you're violating my rights in that regard. So over time, as UGANET, we have seen a very bad trend, especially around foreign companies that have come around to do constructions, road constructions, stadium constructions. In the recent past, we had airport construction.
Let's humanize that, because I know most recently we've done a story around a lady whose job has been affected or taken away from her simply because of violation of her privacy, you know, by the foreign company. Let's talk about that particular example to bring it to life.
Okay. So yes, there was a case that happened about a month ago. But allow me, Priscilla, just to give it a background. In 2016, there were different Chinese companies around here that were employing Ugandans, and they were doing road constructions, which is a good thing. And one of the experiences of the clients that we serve was that they would wake up one day and round them up, take them to a health facility, forcefully test them, and when they would be found positive, they would be immediately dismissed. So UGANET handled about 8 cases. And one of the instances that we found actually very disturbing was that these foreign companies believed that HIV was a big malaria, and that's what they would call it. So in such a way that they considered it as contagious, and therefore they needed to eliminate these people from places of work. These people today have gone home. They cannot apply for jobs elsewhere. Recently, we saw similar facts coming back to our disturbance, because we've seen this before, and we thought it was addressed and it was in the past. So someone is hired as a laundry attendant, and of course they are assigned a place of work where they are dealing with laundry, not people, Priscilla. And in the course of the employment, they are subjected to a compulsory test against their wish. But they are very good, they voluntarily disclose.
It's indicated in their contracts that they sign with these companies that, you know, periodically they'll be subjected to these tests?
That's where the other challenge is. The employment law we have in the country is very clear. If you employ me, the law mandates you to give me particulars of my employment, and that is where they fault first. So you find such individuals are not given written contracts. But because they need jobs, someone will get in there and start working, and at the end of the month, they will be paid whatever they agreed to. So in the process of the employment, very many things could go wrong because you're not also very sure on the terms of your employment. So even when you're summarily dismissed, you know, you've not been led to know the policies, so you've not consented to anything. But you know that employer-employee relationships always have an aspect of power around them. So because of that, if you need your job and they tell you, we are taking you to this clinic to test, you definitely say yes. But it is coerced because you need your job, you're protecting your job. So someone working, attending to laundry, the following day is dismissed because the hospital that did the testing has returned results, and in breach of confidentiality and the right to privacy, delivered them to the employer. Exactly. Imagine a situation where you're working and your employer picks your results through a health worker, and then they return them to them and not you. So there are several violations of human rights around that. So then the following day you're dismissed, and you're dismissed publicly in a very dehumanizing way, in a very embarrassing way, where all your colleagues around you will get to know about your status. If someone has chosen not to live openly about their status, but they're adhering to treatment, accessing treatment, and they're suppressing their viral load, where is the problem?
Madam Nayiga, unfortunately, we have this conversation in light of the fact that every other day they're opening up a new industrial park, meaning that more foreigners are coming into the country, more foreign investment is coming into the country, especially that kind of investment that then requires massive recruitment in order to get production moving. However, what gaps are currently existing within the policies and the labor laws that are not protecting Ugandans, especially from, you know, the things that you've talked about, the privacy when it comes to infringement on the human rights and the whole inhuman treatment that you have alluded to?
Thank you so much, Priscilla. So it is a good thing, and we really support development. We are pro-development. We are happy when we see stadiums coming up, when we see these good roads coming up. Uganda is very good at laws. I think we've been told that several times, and it is a fact. So in this country, we host an institution called the International Labour Organization, one of the UN family members. And that is not enough. As a country, we have gone ahead and ratified their conventions on non-discrimination of employees of all kinds. And I think I know that the 1960 convention by ILO, which we host here, is very specific on non-discrimination of people living with HIV at places of work. Uganda has already ratified that convention. And it's not the only one, there are several. Apart from ratifying, we have gone ahead and brought these clauses into our national laws, the mother law being the Constitution of Uganda. We further have the employment law, which is very specific on non-discrimination of people living with HIV. It further goes ahead to create regulations thereunder that further talk about non-discrimination in detail. We have the HIV Prevention and Control Act, which is very clear on non-discrimination, on consent when someone is being tested to know their serostatus. So the issue is not about the gaps in the laws. We have enough laws.
There are no gaps
we have policies, they are everywhere. But rather enforcement is where we see the gap as UGANET. That in terms of enforcement, is where our institutions that are responsible with enforcement are not doing enough. When you look at the structure nationwide, we have the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development. In every local government structure, you find a labor officer. Every small district, like in this particular district where the case happened in Hoima, there's a labor officer. Maybe we should be asking ourselves, how much is allocated to these different structures to ensure that they are doing their work the way they are supposed to do it. We have the Equal Opportunities Commission that is supposed to ensure that the rights of people living with HIV are protected. And right now as UGANET, we are before the Equal Opportunities Commission, by the way, and we are asking it to pronounce itself in terms of the rights of people living with HIV, but also to go ahead and issue directives and direct and give punitive damages to those companies that we think are violating the rights of people living with HIV. Because it is only then that such big companies will realize that they're actually violating rights and then protect them, including those of the people that they are still employing.
Even though the Equal Opportunities Commission actually does pronounce itself accordingly and does give the directives, they only will be received as recommendations because they're not the principal overseer of this conversation. You do have the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development that then has to pick up those, draw them in and be able to adhere to them accordingly. But as you know, currently there's a limitation of fundings in order for the ministry to be able to respond as required. That would be one of the baseline, things that they will tell you that that is true, that should be done, but we can't because there's no money, there's no funding for it. However, I know that you've also had engagements with the ministry on a ministerial level, and what commitments have they given you, or nevertheless, what are some of those little strides that you feel they have taken that have made a change?
Yes, thank you so much. So one, at the start I said we had these matters coming in 2016. At that time, we didn't have the Equal Opportunities Commission. Okay. So we wrote to the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development. We worked with the Ministry of Gender in order to address this gap. I know that they are doing so, they are trying. I know that they are conducting periodic reviews to these different companies to ensure they are checking their policies. But from practice, we have learned just by the experience of the country having very good laws. There's a difference between the laws being there and being practiced or being enforced. So we want to ask them, and we are asking them to go an extra mile when they are doing their periodic assessments, when they are checking, when these companies come into the country, just as they land in the ministries, the responsible departments need to ensure they bring them on board so they do not violate the rights of people living with HIV. We find it disturbing that after a case has happened, you're going to the company to ensure you support it on putting in place policies. But then there's a Ugandan that has already been affected. As we speak, this particular case is of a mother. This mother is now at home. She's a single mother. She's supposed to be fending for her children. She can't do that. But she also has emotional torture that she's going through right now because of the experience. So yes, we need at a higher level the government ensuring they are allocating the right budgets to these institutions to enable them work. But also at a district level, how much is a district labor officer given? Because in a district, they have the mandate of supervising these different companies and ensuring that they are meeting the standards that are required of them under the laws of Uganda. But do they have budgets to do so? And if they don't, you're crippling them. You're putting them there, but without giving them enablers to be able to protect the citizens. That way, I think if they can be supported to have enough budgets. Really, this goes to the Parliament of Uganda and everyone else that is responsible with allocating, with budget allocations.
Okay. There's other support structures such as the judiciary, and I know that in one way or another you've had in defense of those that have been affected or whose rights have been abused through the laws and policies. You've had to interface with the judiciary. And so how has that judicial structure been supportive in bringing justice, serving justice to the affected people?
Thank you so much. So I will say that broadly issues concerning access to justice what we are seeing is that we see a bit of sluggishness in management of cases. The JELOS report of 2022 indicated that an average civil case will spend about 2 to 3 years in court. What does that mean for a mother who was working to earn 200,000 shillings? What does that mean for someone who feels they have been stigmatized? And these are the challenges that we are seeing. Because of that, our clients are not very quick in terms of seeking redress through the system. I will tell you for a fact, for this particular case we are talking about, there are several others. Our client vehemently says she was not dismissed alone. There are others, but they have weighed their options and they do not want to take the arbitration level journey, and that we truly respect. So in terms of the judiciary, it's also an ongoing conversation. As UGANET, we've had several discussions with them because the issue is broader. The issue is stigma and discrimination, and it does not eliminate anywhere. We are seeing it in all spaces, including in courts of laws. And so we've been having different conversations with the judiciary. As an organization, we developed what we call the Judicial Handbook on HIV and the law, because we know that when the community of people living with HIV interact with that system, sometimes they feel more stigmatized and they are not encouraged to pursue their cases to conclusion. So it is an ongoing conversation. We believe that the judiciary also needs to come up and pick this up in terms of ensuring that their systems are user-friendly for people living with HIV. I'll give you an example. As a practicing lawyer, I know that for the few times I've been in court, I've seen instances where when someone is pleading a locutus, that's what we call it in the law of practice, where someone is being asked to mitigate the punishment they should be getting. In some instances, lawyers have pleaded the HIV status of a client, and sometimes it is done in open court. When someone is applying for bail, one of the instances, one of the conditions that a lawyer will be very quick to pick on is the HIV status. But you're trying to release this person on bail, but you're damaging them further by publicly, without your knowledge, announcing their results to everyone else. There could be LCs within that open court. There could be relative that didn't know about this status. So stigma and discrimination is an ongoing concern, and we need to address it. Maybe Priscilla, as I conclude on this, allow me say this. The UNAIDS Global Report 2024 has indicated that one of the reasons as to why as a country we are not achieving the intended targets on addressing HIV by 2025 is that we have laws and practices in place that fuel stigma and discrimination for the community. And it has adverse effects because at the end of it all, when people are stigmatized and discriminated, they will not adhere to treatment. But also those that are not on treatment will not come out to test. And that, in a way, is undoing the country's efforts, the global efforts, in ensuring that we end HIV by 2030.
Okay, Madam Nayiga, you, among other civil societies in the country, are pushing leaps and bounds, you know, to help bridge the gaps that government is possibly having around these issues. So in terms of initiatives to address the issue at hand, they are initiatives, they are programs, even on the side of government in one way or another. They've had strategic plans as well as initiatives to tackle this issue. But at the end of the day, we're not seeing the loud impact that they should be having in order to then align with the pressure to enforce and have all these laws, as you have said, existing but not being implemented to protect the Ugandans. Then what's the way forward?
What's the way forward? So the power lies within us. We have it. We have the power to make the change that we want to see. And when I say we, I'm considering myself as a Ugandan and therefore part of the government. We have the power to do so. I have already said we have the laws. So how about we start enforcing the laws? I would expect that if matters of stigma and discrimination come before any judicial body, they should be expedited. I would expect that the Equal Opportunities Commission pronounces itself on issues of stigma and discrimination of people living with HIV. I would expect that the Parliament of Uganda, and especially the HIV Committee, comes out and pronounces itself and supports the community of people living with HIV. I would expect as civil society organizations to work closely with the different institutions, as long as we have their willingness to address the gaps that we are seeing, especially on enforcement of policies and helping foreign companies bring them to speed with the good practices. I mean, even if you were to put it in just human understanding, how would I transmit HIV to someone if I'm dealing with laundry? Even if I was cooking anyway, we know how HIV is spread. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done around creating awareness. Maybe we have done so for the country at large, but what about the people that are coming in?
Yes,
are
so
they at
now
the same
maybe
speed?
they need to design awareness initiatives towards entities such as, you know, companies that then have to employ these people. Maybe that's where the gap is.
Yes, and so the government and the Ministry of Gender and the other responsible departments, like I said, have been responding. But it shouldn't be an issue of responding. We should be preventing. We should not do this at a time when stigma and discrimination has already happened. Because that one person that you're sending out can cause a huge impact in terms of the struggle to end HIV. So we are saying that, yes, we want the companies to have policies, but we should not be pushing them to put in place policies and practice them at a time when they have already violated human rights. It should be at the entry point. So when they are getting into the country, what system allows them in? At what point are they given the handbooks or the policies? At what point are they enabled to appreciate the different laws within which they have to move? So that the people that they intend to recruit, before they even recruit them, they find them ready with conducive environments that adhere to human rights and that they are ready to work. And
all right, so those are checks that can be put on the side of the employer.
yes,
Let's bring it to the side of the employee. When they're getting into, you know, arrangements and contracts with the employer, ignorance is actually, you know, one of the downsides. One, ignorance about your health status, for example. In this case, HIV. What's your HIV status? People being ignorant of that. And then two, also the fact that it's largely the non-skilled labor force that is affected by such arrangements, or the informal labor that is affected by such arrangements. How do they get to protect themselves when they don't even have the bare minimum of a document to actually prove that they are in a labor arrangement with company X, organization X? So where do they, if that is their bare minimum and they don't even have that, then how do you expect them to protect themselves or even be protected in later times?
that's a difficult one, Priscilla. One, the employment laws, and I should say even the practice in this country, are very clear on the fact that there's usually a power imbalance. So even when you go to the industrial court will most likely give some kind of understanding to employees, and it's very clear the powers are never balanced. So I feel like it is a huge burden placing it on the individuals to ensure that when they are given a job, they are forcing their employers to give them particulars. The law of employment is very clear. Actually, it should be Section 3. It's very clear that the employer has the mandate, once they have gotten you into that relationship, to give you your particulars of employment. And if they do not do so, then they are violating your right. So maybe then the task would be on us as civil society organizations to always ensure that we are reminding our citizens to demand for what is rightfully theirs. But the question would be, within their powers or their status, wherever it is they are they able to stand up and say, this is what I need? without risking being fired or somehow being eliminated from places of work. So it's a difficult one, but I believe that it should be the employers that are supposed to ensure that this law is enforced. And if that is not done by them, the people in place that are supposed to check them, like the labor officers, this is what they are supposed to do when they inspect places. I know that they have a mandate to inspect places of work. I know that they visit factories. I know that they visit construction sites. When they do so, they should not stop at looking at policies. They should be able to ask these companies whether
they shouldn't stop at seeing if the employee is having the right gear to do the work.
Thank you. That is if they're even doing so. So that should not stop at that. It should really go to the depth, probably even conducting random interviews with employees so they can really appreciate what is really going on in these places of work.
Okay, so if this is an element of opportunity through which the two sides can actually be addressed, the employer and the employee, through these labor officers, have you had interactions with these labor officers? And in so doing, what has been their response?
Yes, so we have done so, and I should say really on different cases. So usually they will summon the company, and when they summon the company, they will sit and hear the matters. And the law mandates that if you're not satisfied with their decision, you move on. In many instances, we have moved on and appealed to the next level. So that's like really been the relationship between us and the labor officers. That's how we've handled matters. But we believe that beyond that, they should be able to do this on their day-to-day, because they should be checking these companies that are employing Ugandans.
All right, so as we wrap up this conversation, we must forge a way forward, because at the end of the day, Ugandans must be protected, employees must be protected, especially those with special consideration of their health status and ability status for that matter. And over the course of your work, I know that you have developed some recommendations on how best as a country, as a community, as individuals, we can go around those. Could you share those with us?
Yes, thank you so much. So I talked about the judicial handbook on HIV and the law. That document was developed together with judicial officers at a higher level, and it is a document that's being used. We encourage the judiciary to further popularize it, to ensure that judicial officers are aware of the critical aspects around HIV and the law, especially when clients come before them. We are in the process of developing the parliamentary handbook on HIV and the law, and we are working with different members of parliament on ensuring that this also comes out. So those are some of like the few things that we put in place in ensuring that we are addressing stigma and discrimination. As we speak, we're also having an engagement with the Equal Opportunities Commission, and our call to action to them is to ensure that they pronounce themselves. We want to see the declarations. Give us the declarations, we shall run with them. Of course, the mandate lies on us then to sensitize the communities, to ensure that they know where they can get services, where they can go in case they are abused or their rights are violated. So that stands at that. But overall, our call has been around everyone within the country to ensure that we do end stigma and discrimination of people living with HIV, because we have seen that it has the potential of watering down the efforts that we have put in place on ending HIV. I already spoke to the fact that stigma and discrimination are barring access to testing, but also access to treatment. When someone is stigmatized or discriminated, they will most likely hide back. They will not suppress their viral load, and in the process, they'll end up transmitting, and then maybe we even lose them. So there are very many efforts as an organization. We're also doing legal aid services, and we specifically target people living with HIV. We work closely with structures like different district hospitals, referral hospitals in different districts where we work. Okay. So all those we have put in place to ensure that we're eliminating stigma and discrimination. Awareness campaigns, these will never stop. On a daily, we are doing awareness campaigns in this regard.
All right. Grace Nayiga, Executive Director with UGANET, thank you so much for your tireless efforts in ensuring the protection of Ugandans as individuals, but also in the labor force, that those that are living with HIV/AIDS are well protected against any cancers that could be. But at the end of the day, I think one of the best ways that you and I can actually protect ourselves is by equipping ourselves with information. I just talked about the laws and policies and regulations that do exist. As an employee, are you very vast of these, laws and policies? Do you have them at your fingertips so that in case of anything, in case an employer is requesting or requiring or demanding or commanding you to do anything that is outside the confinement of what you should be doing between the arrangement of you two, then you are aware of it and you can defend yourself accordingly. You are your first defense. Before you can run to the courts of law, before you can run to government, you are your first point of defense. So, make sure that you are conversant with these laws, policies and regulations that govern your workspace and the kind of work that you do to protect yourself. And later on, we'll be having a healthier labor force. That brings us to the end of this conversation. However, when we return, we're going to go to KCCA at the Authority Center here, and we're going to have an overview of the dispensation of the examinations. The Senior 4 examinations are starting today, and so for Central, you do have the distribution happening at KCCA, and so we do have David Idro that's going to be giving us a point of view on that distribution exercise and how it's being conducted this morning. Do stay with us.